I'm going to be brief because there's a long lineup of folks who are going to be talking today, but I want to thank those of you who came up from the Cape and those who are concerned from all over the Commonwealth. Welcome to your house to have your voice be heard. That is why we have a State House with open doors. So I want to thank you for being here and I want to welcome you. Governor Baker, you need to take a public stand in shutting down this plant and responsibly decommissioning it and dealing with the nuclear waste dump that Pilgrim site will become on the shores of Plymouth, beautiful shores of Plymouth in Massachusetts. The time has come. As someone who runs a business in a highly regulated industry where safety is paramount, public safety is paramount, whose hands early on in my career were on the technical side as a mechanic, inspecting mechanical devices, making judgments. We did a tour of that plant, what was it, Sarah, 5 years ago. And I was appalled then at what I saw in that plant as we toured it. I was appalled at answers to some of the questions that we asked Entergy officials who were touring us around that plant. Their lack of knowledge, their lack of understanding, their lack of answers to questions. Like, where is the tritium coming from? We don't know. But it has something to do with the seagulls on the roof. Really? You know? Or if there are failures in the standby generators that power the cooling pumps, we have a Kubota that is attached to a tractor with a pump on it that we will drive over to the reactor and spray from a hose water onto a potentially melting down nuclear reactor. Okay? We are past those days because voices here and beyond were heard, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has put enough pressure on Entergy to get them to have made the decision that after 2019 that plant will no longer be a nuclear reactor, but it will be a nuclear waste dump. Continuing to store fuel in a wet storage tank where we know the boron panels between that are actually preventing fires from starting, it is not a tenable solution going forward, that storage tank. So this isn't just about saying to Governor Baker, you need to stop the reactor as soon as possible. This is about saying to Governor Baker, you need to insist on the quickest, safest storage of that spent fuel and those spent fuel rod assemblies, because we are in peril if that is not done. And I just, for those who kind of want to not look and have a peace of mind about this, there has never been that type of reactor that has been in service for longer than this reactor has been in service. That makes this reactor now in a test mode. We are a test community to see how long a reactor like that will function safely, and it already hasn't. And we know from the small system failures that it already is showing signs of age and deterioration. We are going to be a community that is a test community for how long you can store spent fuel rod assemblies in that type of storage, how long that will last without breaking down. No one knows that because it hasn't been done anywhere before. And what is at risk if we get this wrong is almost unspeakable. And what's the benefit if we get it right? The best case scenario is that spent fuel sits there and doesn't do anything bad. That reactor actually continues to run until 2019 and doesn't have a problem. We don't need the energy. We all know that, because if we needed the energy, we already would have had brownouts when that plant continues to fall offline. So we know we don't need the energy. The downside risk and exposure, if there should be an event in the reactor or if there should be an event in the wet storage pool, is unspeakable. It's unspeakable to public safety. It's unspeakable on economic terms. Real estate on Cape Cod and within 50 miles of that plant becomes worth zero. That includes the city of Boston. Why your public officials, why your leaders at a state level would not completely do everything in their power to eliminate, mitigate, reduce risk, both as far as public safety and the economy, is beyond comprehension. I certainly just don't understand it. So the questions I would ask the governor if he was here to answer them is, why is this an acceptable risk to you as the leader of our public safety here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? We don't need the energy. We know we don't need the energy. And we certainly don't want, you're hearing the voices loud and clear, the exposure on a public safety standpoint. So I want to thank those who have stepped up. You know, those who got arrested last month trying to deliver a letter to the governor, they had better things to do that day. The folks who are here today to talk, the folks who took the bus up, the folks who are interested around the Commonwealth and around the country, they have better places to be today. Folks are here because we have a legitimate, real concern about the exposure that that plant poses to our public safety and the risk that is completely unacceptable. So let's keep asking questions, the right questions, until we get the answers that we know we deserve, which is public safety is the absolute priority here, and the only way to guarantee that is to shut down the reactor as soon as possible, decommission the plant, move the spent fuel into dry cask storage in transportable units so that when we figure out a way to remove it from that site, we remove it, and then return that site to as close as possible to what it was before that plant was put there 43 years ago. So I stand with you. I will stand with you when we walk to the governor's office to deliver the letter. We will keep asking the questions. We will keep demanding that that plant be shut down and responsibly decommissioned until this government and the federal government responds responsibly. Thank you, and I'm going to hand it off now to Sarah Peake, who has been Thank you. Sarah has and will continue to be in the State House a champion and a leader on this issue, and just because I'm not going to be standing with her in this building as a legislator doesn't mean I won't be standing behind her, continuing to nudge her gently on this issue.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wolf. Thank you not only for your remarks today, but thank you for your leadership. Quite honestly, before you were elected to the state Senate and during the 6 years that you have served with such honor, distinction, and zeal on behalf of your constituents, in particular on this issue, second to none. So thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Peake. I'm the state representative for the 4th Barnstable District. And if you're wondering where the 4th Barnstable District is, if you are familiar with the Susan Baker drawing that says swim east, that is my district. And those are my constituents. And that is why I am standing before you here to say, Governor Baker, do your job, demand the shutdown of the Pilgrim nuclear power plant now. I think you can see by the broad sweep of people who are here today, and by the way, I said to our next senator, Julian Cyr, that isn't it amazing? Yeah. Isn't it amazing how, with just the blink of an eye, you go from representing the next generation to being part of the older generation, because we have the next generation sitting here with our Nauset Regional High School students. So, from high school students, environmental agencies, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, elected leaders, soon to be elected leaders, citizen advocates. I'm sorry to turn my back on all of you. You look so great sitting up there, by the way, so thank you for being here. This is a topic, this is a crisis that reaches a broad swath of people. And I will tell you, now this is an issue that doesn't differentiate between Democrats and Republicans. I am working closely, Dan and I both are, with our colleagues who represent Plymouth, who happen to be members of a party that's different from the party that we are interested in, that we are part of. But public safety does not know party lines. Public safety is about people, it's about our constituents, and it's about doing the right thing. You do have a big group of people to speak, so I will just finish the way I began by saying, Governor Baker, do your job, shut down this plant now. Thank you. And let me introduce Julian Cyr, and he's really here wearing two hats. Yes, I trust that everybody here, you're such activists that you will go to the polls and you'll see a familiar name there on the ballot. But also he brings with him a in-depth and extensive background in public health. And when the news was first announced that Entergy said that it would be closing down someday, the first text message I received was from Julian Cyr, who was working at DPH at that time. And he said, I have some ideas about how we need to have an orderly shutdown of that plant to ensure the state is involved in an appropriate way, both from a public safety aspect and from a financial aspect, to make sure that we, as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, have, on an ongoing basis, the resources we need to have appropriate oversight over the shutting down process. You know, it's not just flipping a light switch and boom, it's over with. In many ways, the real work begins after that reactor is shut down. The first text message I had was from Julian Cyr. Then fast forward to our budget process. I get a call from candidate Julian Cyr who says, I have an idea about a decommissioning commission and who should be on it. And working with Julian, here he is, he's not even working for DPH anymore. He helped me draft that legislation that eventually went back and forth between the House and the Senate. And I'll be the first to admit, it is not a perfect bill. The seats that we had earmarked for Cape Cod folks somehow fell by the wayside, but there are discretionary appointments there, and we are working very hard to ensure that Cape Codders fill those discretionary appointment seats so that we will have a seat at the table. But Julian, he's not even in office yet, and he is already doing the job that he is running for. So with that, I give you Julian Cyr.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Julian Cyr. It's terrific to be here with all of you. To Senator Wolf and Representative Peake, who have been relentless on this issue. I can speak as someone who has worked in and of state government for the last 6 years, working for the Department of Public Health, which is an agency that has some activity and some oversight around health risk communication, around looking at the risks and the public's health surrounding this facility. And both Representative Peake and Senator Wolf have been relentless in pushing state agencies to be accountable on this issue and being real partners with those agencies as far as their needs. And Matt Patrick as well, who really led early on this issue. I had the task when I was at the Department of Public Health at one point to go toe-to-toe with Entergy around getting the utility to resupply potassium iodide pills that Matt Patrick had fought and gotten the utility to pay for 7 years earlier. And so even had the thrill of delivering those potassium iodide pills to our communities in a state-owned Prius. You really get an appreciation for how not fuel efficient a Prius is when you load it with a few 100 pounds of potassium iodide with salt pills. But I just briefly want to speak that I come to this work first as someone who started off as an activist. Yes, an activist in my high school at Nauset Regional High School, and also someone who is a young environmental activist. Proudly wore that Susan Baker t-shirt that an earlier iteration we had as kids. And then as someone who later went into public health and got to work really closely with the health and safety professionals who, you know, in a frustrating way, we do not have authority. Massachusetts does not have authority around what happens inside the plant. And so this is where the governor's leadership is really critical here in calling out to the NRC that this corroding facility must close and that we must be working. The sooner this facility closes, the sooner we can push for a swift and safe decommissioning. And really that's about respecting the health and safety professionals who work in our state government as well, who work in our radiation control program, who work for MEMA and others. You know, these are public servants who know this corroding facility must close, and we need our governor to stand up and support that. This is about risk. This is in public health. As a public health person, we often speak about risk and acceptable risk and risk communication. We're way beyond the line of acceptable risk. We're way beyond the line of actually having adequate risk communication to our communities of what the risk is with this plant. And that's just unacceptable. So I'm really proud to be here, especially with all of you folks. And I'm eager to, if I get the chance, to work very, very hard come January on moving the plant towards closure, getting these spent fuel pools out of dry cast, out of the spent fuel pool into dry cast storage. This is something that it's actually going to take years for them to actually even build the facility to do this. They need to start it now. And so waiting to 2019 and then proposing that this facility goes into what's called safe store, where you mothball the plant, is just simply unacceptable. Imagine this is sort of a corroding old car you've driven around, right? Folks on the Cape know we have beach cars, right? Your 1980s car that you drive to the beach. This is where Pilgrim is, right? And by just abandoning this plant and leaving it in its current state is basically, leaving a corroding vehicle on our doorstep. That we need the current workers who are at the plant now to be involved in decommissioning that is swift, that is safe, and that at least moves the spent fuel. Yes, as Senator Wolf said, it's going to be a toxic waste dump. I'd rather have a toxic waste dump that is at least contained in concrete that's about 6 feet thick and can be transported and moved, opposed to 6 stories up in a pool with a whole corroding element. So I'm glad to be here today, and I'm also glad to introduce Matt Patrick, the once and future state representative for Mashpee, Falmouth, and Bourne.